good to see familiar faces here and some new ones as well for this latest event in the Meet the Author series that the library's been putting on for a few years now. It's intended to encourage dialogue and give us all a chance on the campus community to talk about contemporary issues. There are certainly plenty of those brought up in the book that we'll be hearing about today. So let's look forward to being able not only to hear from the author, but to discuss and talk about some of these issues. We've got, just for your information, a whole bunch of events taking place this fall as part of the Meet the Author series. We have a great one this evening with Stephen Sadow, Northeastern professor, talking about Jewish Latin American poetry and art. We've got a great talk coming up with Dr. Emily Fox-Cales and about her book, Body Shots, The Culture of Eating Disorders in Hollywood. Who would not be interested? And we're also hosting a musical event in November with Boston jazz legend Al Vega and his trio. So if you haven't already done so, you can pick up a program and find out when all these things are happening at the desk outside. You can fill in a comment card at the end of the session today so that we get some good feedback from you. And indeed, if you want to support these events and the library's ability to put them on, you can become a library supporter. And all that stuff's available at the sign-in desk outside. So great. In case you hadn't noticed, we're filming this today as well, so it'll be appearing on YouTube and on iTunes University, so you can check it out afterwards or tell your friends about it for their benefit. Okay. Oh, I should very carefully make sure I thank our co-sponsors on this event as well. NU Bookstore, as ever, is helping us with the running of our Meet the Author of series in general, and is here today, as you'll have seen, with copies of the book outside. And I'm sure Gary will be happy to lurk afterwards and do some of the work that authors are good at.
I have a fantasy of getting writer's cramps.
With pen in hand. Great. So let me introduce today's guest here, Gary Braver, the pen name of Northeastern University English professor Gary Kashgarian. Under this pseudonym, he's published eight critically acclaimed thrillers, including Flashback, the only thriller to have won the prestigious Massachusetts Book Award. His books have been translated into 7 different languages, optioned for movies, and they are celebrated by readers and critics alike for their intricate plots and for their page-turning suspense. One of the best thriller writers in America, and we're lucky to have him on campus. He's the only writer to have 3 books listed on the top 10 highest consumer-rated thrillers on Amazon.com. Okay, when consumers start rating you high, you know you're in the right business. Okay, as his alter ego, Gary Kashgarian, Gary's won numerous awards as a professor here at Northeastern. He teaches classes on science fiction and bestsellers, horror fiction and fiction writing. He's the author of popular college textbooks. He's written fiction and non-fiction pieces that have appeared in a whole range of notable publications like The Globe, The New York Times, and so forth. And today he's here to talk to us about his latest book, Tunnel Vision, which is in part, I guess you could call it a public advisory about cycling in Boston, but also involves mysterious near-death experiences, religious fanatics and scientists, the whole shooting match. I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to invite our guest, Gary Braver.
Thank you, Will. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Will. He talks that way to make the rest of us Americans feel bad about our English. I'd much rather listen to you. I'm going to do something that I had promised myself some years ago I wouldn't do, and that is read a brief bit from a novel of mine. Actually, I have 8 books, but 5 have been under the pen name Gary Braver, and the first 3 were under Kashgarian. And about 12 years ago, I was invited to give a reading and talk at an Armenian men's group in Watertown at the basement of a church, and they said there'd be about 200 or 300 men there, and they said to show up about 6:30. And then we'll have a small meeting before that, business meeting, and then we'll get on the way. I mean, 300 people, 200 or 300 people, my heart leapt up because they were selling books. And so I got there at 6:30, and they had a business meeting for maybe 45 minutes, and then they had an hour-and-a-half enormous shish kebab dinner with large vats of wine on each table, and then they had a half-an-hour discussion of upcoming events. So about 10 minutes to 9, I was on. I got to the third paragraph of reading, and the room was asleep. Everyone is snoring away. So, but I don't see any bottles of wine being passed around, so I will risk reading a brief, actually the first chapter. So we don't have to tell you much about what came before, and then I'll talk about the research on near-death experience. Is rather fascinating, and then take questions from the floor. The present. Friday, January 28th, the present. Thought I died and gone to heaven. You did. 2 jacks staring at you from Anthony's hand, and you draw another. Don't you believe in counting? Damien said. Man, you take some wild-ass risks. But I won, Zack said. Yeah, on pure luck. At least you don't have to play for beer money anymore. More like blood money. I found a clinic that pays $30 a pint. You mean you're selling your blood? Look, I'm down $3,600 on my Discover card, and they're threatening court action. Well, maybe you should stop gambling. It was a little after 1 in the morning, and a mantle of clouds made a hefty underbelly across the Boston sky. Although it was midwinter, the temperature was above freezing, and the streets were free of snow. Zack Kashian was heading to his bike, chained at a light pole near where Damien Santoro had parked his car. They had just left a friend's apartment where a Texas Hold'em game was still going on. After 4 hours, Zack had drawn a high-win hand, a full house, queens over jacks, and walked away with $300 plus pot that had put him in the black for the night. What about your mother? Damien said. She thinks I've got a gambling problem, and she refuses to support it. Except I don't have a gambling problem, I've got a losing problem. They crossed Tremont Street to his bike. Zack's apartment was on Hemingway Street, on the other side of Northeastern University campus. Be true to your school, huh? Because it was so close, he didn't bother with a helmet, just a knitted cap. He unchained his bike and rolled it to Damien's car. Whatever, get some sleep, Damien said. Zack patted his breast pocket. And on Anthony, he sold me half his Lunesta. Maybe you do have a gambling problem, Damien said. I'm not sleeping because I got debts up the grunt, not because I'm gambling. That's nuts. You're borrowing to pay down your debt. Now you're selling your blood. I'm telling you, man, you might want to get off the online poker games. That stuff's dangerous. Zack put out his hand. Thank you, Dr. Phil, or is it Father Damien? Damien took it. You know what you need? No, but you're going to tell me anyway. You need to consider finding God again. I never found him to begin with. Then the first time. It doesn't have to be a church. Just go where you can find some enlightenment, some spiritual enrichment. I'll think about it. No, you won't. But I wish you would. I'm visiting a Buddhist temple on Sunday. You're welcome to come. Damien was a devout Christian who went to different churches in greater Boston each week, sometimes even non-Christian places of worship. I've got another commitment, sorry. Yeah, the God Grumblers. He meant Northeastern's secular humanist society that Zack belonged to. We're not God grumblers. We don't sit around making fun of religions. We're planning an outing to the Museum of Science for inner city kids. If there's a God, he or she would approve. They had met as roommates in their freshman year at Northeastern. Despite the fact that Zack was an unapologetic atheist, they were still fast friends, held together by sniping each other's dogmatism. Whatever, you're too much to rationalists. You need enlightenment. Would Foxwoods qualify? A casino's the last thing you need, Damien said, and gave him a hug and drove off as Zack began pedaling home. Zack had never been to a casino. He preferred home games and the poker websites, perhaps a little bit too much. Some weeks he'd rack up 30 hours missing classes, staying up all night, running 3 and 4 hands at once. Yes, he made money because he played low-ante games, $25 buy-ins. He'd often win, but it took hours to amass a decent haul. With his face buried in flash poker sight, an easy seduction was an occasional $250 buy-in or a $500 game. And each time he felt the rush that came with laying money on the next card, telling himself that this time, his time, was now. But that was the problem. Getting into a twilight zone of your own adrenaline, convinced of beating the odds. Unlike at table games, online you can't read faces. Instead, you're locked in a cubby with a dark goddess and no good sense. And his debt to friends, banks, and credit cards was what he had to show for it. Maybe Damien was right. You're a congenital screw-up, pal, he told himself, 24 years old and going on 14. Zack glanced up at the sky, wishing he had a father he can call for advice. He dismissed the thought and turned up Ruggles Street, thinking that tomorrow he'd head to Mass General Hospital's blood bank, hoping they didn't screen for poker. His apartment was only a few blocks away off Huntington Avenue, but a cold drizzle was beginning to fall and chilling his face. Another few degrees, and the road would be a skim of ice. As he pumped his way down the avenue toward Forsyth, he felt the wad of bills slide up his pocket. With his right hand, he pushed down the lump to keep it from working its way out. But doing so left his other hand to steady the handlebars at against an uneven, slick surface. In a protracted moment, Zack saw the fatal error. His front tire slammed into a jagged edge of a pothole, and the next instant, played out in weird slow motion, the front wheel snapped to the left, sending him flying over the handlebars and coming down dead smack on the top of his head into the base of the crosswalk lights. In a fraction of a second, Zack was suddenly looking down from someplace above, seeing himself lying crumbled across the curb with his head at the base of the pole and his bike on its side, the front wheel at a crazy angle. In that sliver of awareness, he knew he was viewing things from an impossible perspective, and just as he tried to make sense of it, the moment blinked to total black. That's chapter 1. Okay. What happens after this, briefly, is that Zack ends up in a coma for several months and wakes up on Easter weekend, 4 months later, reciting the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, the original language of Jesus. That causes the media to be marveling at this miracle man who wakes up, and also it draws some religious extremists to his bedside seeking miracles. It also catches the attention of neuroscientists not associated with Northeastern University who hang an advertising in the student union saying, need money, get sleep. And Zack, signs up for a lucrative experiment that, unbeknownst to him initially, is a sleep study. And as he continues, they eventually fess up to him that what they are interested in doing is studying near-death experiences to see if there is anything to all the claims, and the objective is to apply wicked atheistic science to proving that the afterlife exists, and by extension, God. And backing the project is a liberal evangelical minister who was hoping to have science demonstrate the existence of heaven and, by extension, God, which would be the greatest discovery ever. Well, there's some dark stuff because there's no free lunch and this is a thriller, so there's some dark stuff, and I'll tell you a little about that later on. And then Zack is a non-believer. He has an out-of-the-body experience, and his father is dead after being wired to a functioning MRI machine, and there's a fictional aspect of it. There is no such machine that can actually image individual neurons. Mass General and all the other hospitals can image clusters of brain cells. But that's where the fictional part comes in. And he has a near-death experience and encounters his dead father and comes back wanting more. And then there's some dark stuff that sets in. Was that the afterlife, or is that something else? Some years ago, in my horror fiction class, I was lucky enough to get Stephen King to come as a guest. And he was asked the most asked question of any novelist: where do you get your ideas? He looked point blank at the student and said, Utica, next question. As if at Utica, New York, there's an idea shop that King goes to, and child zombies, rabid St. Bernards, villages taken over by vampires. The boring answers, you make them up. But sometimes you get ideas from individual experiences, from overheard conversations, from newspaper articles, from movies, and other possibilities. And most of my books have come from all of these. But also, why I write what I write and where the ideas come from, in a sense, is somewhat charged. I write what my publisher calls high-concept novels. I had sold the last Gashgarian book was called Rough Beast, and it's about it centers on a family 10 miles outside of Boston, and the father is an English professor making unprincely wages, and he buys a house much under market price, and he doesn't know, but under the house there are buried bad chemicals from a harebrained military project years ago trying to end the Vietnam War. Something bad gets in the water and affects the 12-year-old child, and he becomes kind of monstrous. If you met my two children, you know the idea guy came from. But in any case, yeah, Beelzebub 1 and 2. But the publisher that I'm with now said, my editor said, give us more of the same. The book had done well. And I said, more of the same what? They said, more of the same high-concept novel centered around families with a kind of biotechnical or biomedical slant of a breakthrough that doesn't blind the reader with too much science, but it just would appeal to a lot of people. And I said, and centered on a family and with a strong female protagonist, because most books in America are purchased by females, which is also true of Men's Ties, by the way. And a page turner. So you have a cliffhangery endings, page turner quality, and good writing. So I said, tell me more about high concept, what that means. And they said something that appeals to the largest number of readers. We're trying to sell books. So this is not literature. So I said, well, okay. And then I had a year and a half to deliver the next manuscript. They know I teach full time, and they know that I can't do one a year, which is what ideally publishers would love. So I looked around me, and all the advertisement, I could see it was clear that the message of most advertising, the message of most commercials on television, the message to almost many of the stories on television and elsewhere is that we revere our youth and kind of discard our elderly. So I wrote a book called Elixir, which is based on the development of an anti-aging drug, and that did fine. I got a movie option, and I don't write series novels. I write standalone. So the whole dramatis personae you have to keep on inventing. You have to have new characters, new stories. But the charge was high concept, some kind of scientific breakthrough that would appeal to readers and would have this kind of thriller, high page turner quality about it. The clock was ticking. I was into the second month, and I did not have my next what if. And I was now desperate and feeling this is the end of my literary life. And on CNN, there was a little factoid which said something to the effect that a poll was taken of several thousand people. This between the last story and the commercial break. So factoid, they had 15% of all the soybeans in America come from Arkansas, something useful stuff like that. And this said that thousands of people had been polled, and they were asked, what is the one thing you could change about yourself if you could? Be more aggressive, less timid, taller, shorter, heavier, thinner, this kind of thing. Remarkably, nearly 80% of the respondents said they wish they were smarter. I said, aha, so a wide fantasy is to be smarter. And about 3 weeks later, out of Princeton University, a neurologist announced that he had invented a superior mouse by injecting the gene for long-term memory into the fetus of a rat inside its mother's belly. And when it and its other rodent-y siblings were born, they put each of these through a series of very complicated mazes. And the one that had been injected with long-term memory, which is, I guess, a secret for high intelligence, would whip through these complicated mazes as if radar directed, whereas its siblings kind of stumble and go backwards or lie on its back or whatever. So now I had a kind of a scientific or pseudo-scientific explanation how we could boost intelligence, and that became a book called Gray Matter, about a woman who seems to have everything going for her. She's smart, she's young, she's healthy, got a seemingly successful marriage, and a gorgeous 6-year-old child who sings like an angel, but he's slow. And we learned at the beginning of Gray Matter that the mother had taken some drugs in college and caused her child's low IQ, and she hears through the grapevine how a clandestine and expensive and morally questionable procedure would turn slow kids into geniuses, and she is tempted. And now I was fired again. The clock was ticking, had to deliver, and I'm now desperate. I am now watching Dr. Phil, mining where I could find literary ideas. And one morning, I'm flashing through the channels, panicking. I need a what if, I need a big what if, and there is Dr. Phil with this very attractive, blonde, 28-year-old mother of 2 who is sobbing in Dr. Phil's arms. Why is she sobbing in Dr. Phil's arms? Because she cannot walk by a mirror without being depressed at how she does not resemble Jessica Simpson. And she had 16 cosmetic procedures on her face toward that end. And of course, what she needed was not another surgeon. She needed a shrink in about 10 years on a couch. And that's what Dr. Phil said to her, essentially. And that gave me the idea for a book called Skin Deep, about, it had all the hot issues that I thought would be great for a thriller. The pressure on women to be pretty, being able to go to technology, medical technology, to get what you weren't born with, the ideal face, and then how cosmetic surgery is now out of the closet. You've got cosmetic surgeons advertising on TV. You've got Joan Rivers joking that her face has seen more knives than Benihana. Love that line. And in any case, that can be an idea for a book called Skin Deep. And now I was fired again. Now coming up with the next what if, and it was the 3rd book of a 3-book contract. And the highest possible, you can even see a kind of pattern, boost life, boost intelligence. There's another one called flashback, get a cure for Alzheimer's disease, Skin Deep, get the ideal face. The older I get, you can see where my fantasies are going. So the ultimate is find God. I have never had a near-death experience, with the exception of a few committee meetings. However, it is perhaps the greatest mystery we have. Where are we going, if anywhere, after death? And I'm sure you've all heard of near-death experiences. It is a fascinating phenomenon. And some of you may have even had some near-death experiences. But the first recording of near-death experience goes back to Plato's Republic, 3rd century BC, where Plato reports that a soldier came back from a particular war, crossed over into some transcendent realm, and saw his fellow soldiers, and then came back, something to that effect. But it was the first that we know of recording of near-death experience. In the 1970s, a man named Raymond Moody coined the term near-death experience, and then physicians and nurses and victims came out from everywhere, reporting these in medical journals, in newspapers, and then there were many books that hit the New York Times bestsellers list, including the very first, Life After Life. And then it was followed by a whole slew of books about near-death experience. I Saw the Face of Jesus, 90 Minutes in Heaven, and then more recently, Heaven is for Real, a little boy's astounding trip to heaven and back. Little bastard's 7 years old. I'd like to give him a near-death experience. It was not, he had a coma, and he came back, and his 2 parents are ministers, and they fed him all sorts of stuff, including the visions he had of God sitting on a large gold throne, Jesus sitting on a shorter gold throne, and Gabriel sitting on an even shorter gold throne. I mean, it sounds like a boring place, and all this stuff that people have wings in the afterlife, and Jesus loves children, and it's all this stuff, which was clearly, this kid was his parents' personal prophet. And tell both ways. Any case, there are lots of books on it, and so I said, this would be a fascinating topic. And I had a friend, I never had an experience, near-death experience, I said, but I had a friend who had. She had drowned in a pool when she was 14 years old and saw herself going down a dark, dark tunnel and feared it would not end. And then she snapped awake in a hospital. I have interviewed dozens of people for this book and read hundreds of reports, and they are fascinating. And what makes them fascinating is that there are very specific characteristics common to each that, and to me the most fascinating, what I'll talk about in a moment, is they first experience an out-of-the-body experience where their mind leaves their brain, just as Zack does in the last of chapter 1. The mind leaves the brain and takes an almost aerial helicopter-like survey of them. They'll see themselves on operating tables being sliced open by surgeons, or see themselves on the side of a road with an accident, their car smashed nearby, and EMTs are pounding their chest or hitting with the electric paddles. They'll see themselves, they'll hear conversations. Then they will move down a tunnel. And in this tunnel, they may see what they perceive as celestial light. They'll pass into that celestial light, having an overwhelming sense of tranquility, of peace, of unconditional love. They may have a life review, and they may encounter spiritual beings, dead relatives, Jesus, the Virgin Mary. If they are a Muslim background, they'll sense a presence of Muhammad, because there's no iconic image of him, of course, or a sense of presence of Allah. You even have Jews and atheists who don't believe in an afterlife would sense a being of light that would guide them into some transcendence beyond. Oftentimes, the particular religious upbringing of the victims would inform the kinds of experience they had. But there are 5 or 6 very clear characteristics. And the last is they don't want to come back. I interviewed a woman who had died in childbirth. And she is Jewish, and she passed on to some transcendent realm, and she was led to a well, and at the well there was this iconic figure of Jesus Christ, from the art we have seen in the Middle Ages on up, and even earlier, and he led her to the well, and she felt such an overwhelming sense of peace and unity with Jesus that she didn't want to go back. He showed her in the well her 2 children, and there's sounds of suffering, and she saw her images of her 2 children reaching up to her, and Jesus said, "You have 2 kids who love you, you have responsibilities, go back." And like the snap of a magician's finger, she was back in recovery room in the hospital. So these are rather remarkable stories, and now, what I wanted to do is write a book in which science and religion come into the traditional conflict. Drawing from 2 forces in my own childhood, I was brought up in a Christian home, and I majored in physics and was a physicist for a few years at Raytheon. And near-death experience is one of those bugaboos that people cannot really say it is or it isn't for real. Most religions promise an afterlife, that there is a transcendent state, a heaven, a hell. Science says once you're dead, it's blotto, you're dead, you're flatlined, you go nowhere, your body dies, your brain dies, that's it, the switch is turned off. And I wanted to write a book that reconciled the two, that creates a kind of détente between science and religion, and that draws from my background. And to those people who have had near-death experiences, the experiences themselves were not visions, they were not hallucinations. To them, they were real. They really did go to some transcendent other realm. They really did meet dead relatives. They had that great sense of, maybe met Jesus and God. They had that great sense of well-being. They did go down tunnels into celestial light. Scientists would say it's neurobiology, not theology. that when you are dying, and this is an altruistic aspect of human evolution, thank goodness, that when we are dying, the brain shuts down and can create, as a neurooptical nerves begin to snap off, turn off, it creates a sense of moving down a tunnel. And then the synaptic misfirings would create a sense of light. And this is the altruistic part. As the brain dies, it secretes serotonin and endorphins and other buffering compounds that act as pillows to the horror of our own death. That we end up, feeling, this great, overwhelming well-being, comfort, and that the expectations of seeing dead grandmothers or children in the afterlife, seeing Jesus in the afterlife, seeing Allah in the afterlife, are cued into our expectations and hope. Those people who, are brought up in a religious environment, or it just become, even if they're agnostics or non-believers, you can't escape the fact there are religious people all around you. You know about Christianity, you know about other religions. Now, in the research, and like I said, I'm a skeptic. I'm a former scientist, and I'm not a very churchly person. But what I learned was, and this is one of the most fascinating aspects. And you may have heard the expression, "Some people are wired to find God." I looked the expression up and did some research on it. This is very real. That is, some people are truly spiritual. What does that mean? What does that mean from a scientific point of view? And scientists wanted to know what that meant also, and including a neurosurgeon named Jeffrey Newberg. What he had done was he had asked for volunteering Carmelite nuns, Benedictine monks, Buddhist monks, Indian fakirs, and asked them to induce themselves, to create in themselves a trance, a meditative spiritual trance by muttering prayer, by reciting chants, by whatever it took to get themselves into this kind of transcendent state where they don't even know where their bodies end and the rest of the universe begins. They are, and their heart rates go down, whole metabolism slows down, and remarkably, they were wired up with SPECT analysis, that is, a single photon emission computerized tomography. The heads are all kind of wired. And in the parietal lobe, which is above the right ear and across the top of the head, what I call in the book the God lobe, that in the parietal lobe, there is a very characteristic neuroelectrical pattern of those people who are spiritual. And it is unlike the neuroelectrical patterns of the rest of us unenlightened folks. So some people are truly spiritual. And they are wired, in their brains to find God. It does not mean there is a God, but they are so wired. Now, so scientists say, if this is the case, and there is scientific evidence that some people are truly electrically, neuro-spiritual, then there should be, if you're going to come up with a theory of the universe, be able to fold this into it. There should be some Darwinian advantage. Why are some people wired to be spiritual and others are not? Well, it does make sense, and if you think about it, you go all the way back to the beginning. Every single religion was founded around a spiritual leader. Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. You go to the caves of Altamira in Spain, or you go to the other prehistoric caves in France, and you will find remarkable wall paintings of antelopes and bison and other creatures, and also people. But you'll find occasionally one person with that enormous head with giant antlers on it. That is the village shaman. And so the advantage is that these religious people are magnets for holding together the community. They have seen the other world. They have maybe communed with dead relatives and deities and spirits of animals, whatever. But this does seem to be an evolutionary advantage. To religious people, this is disappointing because it says that if we are neurobiologically wired to find God, it means it's biology, not divine inspiration. Scientists, hard-nosed scientists, will say that this is good news because that means religion has an evolutionary purpose. This is a thriller, Tunnel Vision. And it is like any thriller, it is driven by dread. You know something bad is going to happen. You may even know who is going to set off the bomb in Yankee Stadium. You can tell I'm from Boston. You even know when it might happen. There's a ticking clock. It's going to happen at such and such a time. And the engine that drives a thriller is dread, and you have to. What the protagonists try to do is stop the mayhem from happening to innocent people. And that was the problem, because most people embrace near-death experience as evidence of God. However, not everybody. And I knew there was a God when I went online and found that some people hate the thought of near-death experience, consider it blasphemy. Why? Because if anybody can die and claim they've come back having glimpsed God in heaven, then you don't have to fulfill the requirements of a good Christian or a good Muslim or a good Jew or any other religious, because you earning your way into God's grace. I mean, if you could have in heaven then, Mother Teresa and the Pope playing poker with Osama bin Laden and Gaddafi. So they see, and we're talking about extreme fundamentalist Christians belonging to no one particular church. Extreme fundamentalist Christians. You go online and you Google near-death experience and Satan, and you'll get thousands of hits. And you go on some of these sites, and they consider it blasphemy. So I said, I have got my antagonist. And my protagonist, this young kid, Zack Kashian, and now I had the antagonist, who consider near-death experience up there with divination and sorcery, pure blasphemy. And I've got someone on the other side who is, trying to stop this project, this near-death experience project, which is, by the way, a secret project, only because they're not, until they have hard evidence that Zack's mind did go across and maybe merge with that of his dead father. Will they announce it to the world, hopefully to unite all religions and the kind of global strife we're seeing today? So the intentions are good, but there are other people who want to stop this and don't see it as such. Well, after all the research and all the writing, I don't know if there is an afterlife, but the older I get, the more I'm in favor of one. Thank you. Questions, please. Please, some questions. I would love to take some questions. Range wherever you'd like. All right, did I put you in a near-death state? Yes, Alex. The near-death experience, what? I'm sorry. Yes, yes. Most of them are positive, but there are some near-death experience, and they're all, great, in so much as when people came back, they came back feeling they've encountered something transcendent, maybe God, maybe heaven, maybe have seen dead relatives, and they feel great comfort that there is a place that our beloveds are at. In fact, that's the motivation of the Harvard neuroscientist running this project. It's not just intellectual, victory, but she lost her husband and son one Mother's Day 10 years ago while she was celebrating Mother's Day and sent them to see the Red Sox game, and they were killed in an accident. So she has personal reasons for wanting to be one. And the majority of those who have had these experiences come back better people. They love life better, they embrace life better, they're appreciative of the time they have and the families that they have. But not all of them are positive. A small percentage, 5 or 10%, are negative. And this woman who drowned did go down a tunnel, and she may have been cued in that clinical death that she experienced in 4, 5, 10 minutes, whatever it was, by the coldness of the surroundings and the darkness of the water. And she said she kept on going down a tunnel and feared she wouldn't be able to stop. And then it gets worse. Others report going down a tunnel And it gets darker and darker and darker instead of towards some celestial light, and they can't stop. And they even imagining putting their arms and feet out to try to stop these slide downward. Others hear mockery, and gets really nasty. One man said he had died, and he was clinically dead for a while, and came to a very dark place. It was not celestial light. It was like a Hieronymus botch, a dark Hieronymus botch painting. People were being tortured and flayed and stabbed, and there was sounds of human suffering and smells really, really foul, and then occasionally jagged, blade-sharp kind of structures. And it was almost like he was perhaps informed by medieval paintings of hell or Hieronymus Bosch or, covers of horror magazines. But it was just a horrific experience. And, and then there are 3 levels of negative experiences, the kind of going down and not being able to stop, losing control completely, coming out into some kind of hellscape. And the third, kind of mocking hellscape, the third might be even worse, total blankness. You are aware, you are sentient, you are conscious in this near-death experience, and you can't see anything. Your sensory equipment has gone flatline along with the rest of you, but you are aware of this kind of gray gauze thing you fell into, this nothingness. And that might be the most terrifying, even more so than the kind of Stephen King nightmares, because it gets close to what is a hideous thought, that in fact, not even a thought, a concept we can't even get our minds around, of the end of our consciousness, no longer being sentient. We are always thinking. Even when you're asleep, you have that little margin of awareness, I'm asleep, and you wake up and go back to sleep again. But this is blankness. We can't conceive of no longer being able to think, no longer being able to be sentient, being conscious. So that might be the scariest one. So those 3 negative, that cluster was most moving to me. The others were, most terrifying. The others were, just positive. Like I said, I'm a skeptic. The one characteristic that cannot be explained by neurobiology are the out-of-the-body experiences. Because when people have their minds leave their brains, because duality is separation, these people, this free-floating consciousness of these victims, will pick up conversations. They'll see the footwear of the medics around them. They may even hear conversations of people outside the emergency room. They will know the color of the ambulance the EMTs got out of. Now, they're flatline dead. They're dead. Their neuro-optical centers are zipped. They are technically in clinical death. And they come back and report these things. If the reports are not fake that I've heard, then this is something that to me is fascinating. It cannot be explained away. They either did go to some transcendent other state and look down from that, or the brain is a lot more remarkably equipped to pick up data than we ever imagined. It's just astounding. And I'm glad it can't be explained away. I'm reminded of Mark Twain's wonderful statement that when the scientists explained the rainbow, we lost more than we gained. And I think this is something, I don't want them to explain this away. I like it to be that other possibility. Out-of-the-body experiences means there is something we just don't fathom and won't. And maybe, hopefully, there's something beyond. Other questions? Yes, way back there. Did done what? Like fMRIs, functional MRIs, or anything like what I did in the book? Yeah, that can't be done because you'll face a murder rap if you blow it. You cannot you can't flatline people and put them in an fMRI. Is that what you mean? Right, but how about for death? I don't know. I'm sure people have maybe died in functioning MRI machines, but I don't know about that. And this is what was interesting. What happens in the book will not legally be doable, at least not yet. The kid in this book is flatlined. When I first started this novel, I needed to know if the science would work. And I went to James Steller, who was Dean of Arts and Sciences, the old Arts and Sciences. He was also in the psychology department. He was a neuroscientist. I love the guy. He helped me on 3 or 4 books when it got to neuro stuff. And I said, Jim, I need 2 things. One, I need a chemical that could flatline, and for all practical purposes, the brain and the body thinks they're dead. And all diagnostics said, this guy is dead. I need that. And he looked at me without missing a beat and said, tetrodotoxin. I said, oh, I love you. What is tetrodotoxin? Tetrodotoxin is a chemical that comes from a gland in those adorable cow-eyed pufferfish. You know, it's porcupine fish you see in, in Caribbean, wherever else, warm water places, in the New England aquarium. They get little spikes on them, they have big eyes. They have an organ which is highly toxic. And in Japan, not this country because it's against the law, that particular organ is used in sushi. But you need a specially trained sushi chef so that he or she can cut the gland just thin enough to give you a meal with a buzz, but not so much as their last supper. Because this stuff will flatline, you're dead. Okay. And so we had that, and I said also, I need to have some diagnostic means with a screen that we can put a subject, a volunteer subject, inject tetrodotoxin in this person's system, flatline him or her for 3 or 4 minutes, zap them with epinephrine, get them to come back to life. But I need to know when this person is clinically dead, how I can, in this novel, say we have evidence that the mind has left the brain. And he said what you would need is a functioning MRI machine that could see individual neurons as opposed to the clusters. I said what you want is to have the electrical activity amongst cells stopped. But within the cells, enough electrical activity that collectively this would make mind and could be measured in a functioning MRI machine. And you could see, and this is where we get a little fudgy, fictionally, on the screens, the monitors, the imprint of the brain, and as it dies, but still functions after. And then later on in the book, we see 2 minds that tend to merge. And Zack witnesses horrific murders and thinks he's either losing his mind or he went over and merged with some hideous demon thing, or something else is going on. But you cannot intentionally flatline somebody and do tests for near-death experience and bring them back because you're tampering with with human life. Nor, like I said, anyone who was dying actually put into an fMRI machine so what was going on. I think that would be invasion of a person's moment of death. Other questions or comments, please? Or questions, yes? That's it? Well, you're all flatlined. Yes, Will. Yes. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes, yes. Because I don't like being fooled, I'd like to be convinced. I mean, the opening chapters of H.G. Wells' Time Machine spends a lot of time discussing traveling in the 4th dimension, and you want to suspend disbelief, so I try to create a kind of pseudo-scientific explanation to say, yeah, okay, I buy that. The readers say buy it. Sometimes it works in some people's books, and sometimes it doesn't. I think it works in mine because being a former scientist, I know when the truth is strained, and I try not to make that happen as best I can. But I think probably in teaching science fiction too, I know when it works and when other times it's asking too much of the reader. And I try not to go that far. Other questions? Well, oh yes, Mick. Yes, yeah. Yeah, the question is how I have different points of view characters, different plot lines going along. How do I do that? Sometimes I write one plot line pretty far through and then I jump to the other. one of the advantages, in fact, one of the hallmarks of, or the characteristics of thrillers is that they come in multiple points of view, as opposed to first-person point of view. So you can jump around and flesh out different characters. And I work very hard at making my villains non-villainous. I mean, real people who are evil don't get up in the morning and brush their teeth in the mirror and say, there is the face of evil. I mean, people have sweet-smelling reasons for why they do bad stuff. In this book, I've got a hitman. I've got a really cool scene. He confesses multiple murders in a confession booth and gets hired to, to become a warrior for Jesus and stop near-death experiments. Any case, he is a hitman, and he had done it for business, and had a heart attack before the book opens up. And he hasn't been in church for 40 years and doesn't believe. And he said, "But if there, he thinks maybe God spared him. I'm going to clean you up. You're going to work for me. I think there's some goodness in your soul. Stop doing what you're doing, and I'm going to save you." So he goes to church, and he's hoping that he can open a path between, if there is a God, he wants to go to heaven. If there is a heaven, he wants to go to heaven, and he wants to get in God's good grace. And so every motive, his motivations are, I want to be a good guy again. I want to redeem myself and maybe go to heaven if there is one. So it is the motivation that keeps him going. And I try to do a psychodrama. I mean, every character in a book I write, and any character in any book, thinks the book's about them. And so you try to get into their heads and say, how would I end this book? What do I want? And how would I love this book to end? That makes me the most important character and ends with my victory. So that's what I do, and I foil each one of those, the protagonist, the antagonist, the little people in between, because I want to, I believe that what drives a good book is also characterization, and you try to flesh those out as best you can, and giving them credible reasons for why they do what they do, good and bad, But sometimes it's tough, I mean, because I write hybrids. That is, I have a thriller wrapped around a mystery. And mysteries are driven by puzzle solving, the Charlie Brown's Body in chapter 1, putting clues together to nab the bad guy at the end. And a thriller is driven by dread. You know who the bad guys are. You just want to stop them from creating some havoc. So that gets complicated in terms of the strategy of letting out information without giving too much away. That's where it gets dicey for me, and that's why it takes me 14, 18 months to do a book. Other questions? Well, thank you very much. If you'd like a copy, I'll be more than happy to sign it to you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.